I'm so excited for our guest on the show today, Jennifer D. St. George, a legend in practice management and consulting. She's given well over 1,000 lectures around the globe. She's written hundreds of articles, and the key to success is a referral-based practice. Today, we're going to talk about how to navigate our perfectionist personalities, the importance of team appreciation and evaluation, and finally, we'll have some fun role-playing common office controversies. The Dr. Tom Show starts now. So I want to welcome our guest, Jennifer D. St. George. I want to thank you so much for giving us your valuable time to be on the show today. I remember my first experience hearing you speak was about 30 years ago. I was fresh out of dental school. And you had a great mantra that's still relevant today. Inform before you perform, no surprises. And this relates to giving our patients or getting from our patients a financial agreement before we start treatment. Are there other mantras that you have in 2025? How have things changed?
Well, first of all, it's an honor and a privilege to be invited, Tom. You and I go back too many years to count, so thank you. I have a lot of sayings that I've developed over the years, and honestly, they have not changed. In fact, inform before you perform, no surprises, has become even more important today at the end of 2025, and we're looking at the new year. Because we seem to have been developing a generation, perhaps, whether it's because they're married to their TikTok or the YouTube or to email, they're not really communicating in the way that they used to. I live in Silicon Valley, and one of the complaints is that two employees in the same department sitting next to each other don't talk to each other, they just email each other. So when I say inform before you perform, no surprises, that's not just financial. That's everything. That's the emergency patient. Let the patient know what the options are. Every single thing we do in dentistry or in healthcare is inform before you perform, no surprises. And the last thing I'd say on this subject, some years ago when I was more involved with our local dental society than I am now, they told me that over 70% of patients who reported their dentist to their local dental society, a complaint, formal complaint, casual complaint, whatever, all had to do with money. It did not have to do with clinical.
Yeah, that's a great message for people to hear. And in the realm of practice management, you have described it as a 3-division management model where you're managing the patient, you're managing the team, and you're managing the business. And of those 3 pillars or those 3 buckets, which one do you find teams you work with struggle with the most?
The one that gets all the headlines and the bucket, of course, that you see the most in webinars and speaking at the conventions is always going to be bucket number 1, patient. And patient is divided into the following. Number 1, it's in 5 divisions within patient management. The first one is marketing. And there are 2 marketing, external marketing. Welcome to the new world of Yelp and Nextdoor. So the external marketing, the one, of course, I am married to, the second part of marketing is internal marketing, building the referral practice. So number 1 is marketing. Number 2 is the new patient experience. Everything from hello to the yes. So it's the hello on the phone to yes, doctor, let's go ahead with treatment. So that's number 2, mini bucket. Then number 3 has to do with money. Can't move ahead till the patient's accepted responsibility. Number 4 has to do with scheduling, because if we don't run on time and look after the patient, we've got a problem. And then number 5 is that potpourri of what I call practice malpractice prevention, the record keeping, how to handle that side. And of course, I don't get into clinical. I'm not a dentist. I've never worked at the chair. I did work at the chair for maybe 10 seconds and backed out and realized I was in the wrong place and that didn't work for me.
Choice.
So I would say those 5 sub-buckets of the patient get mentioned all the time. Team most probably is the most important. Because if you don't have a good team, nothing happens. There simply aren't enough programs on management of staff. And there are 3 buckets. So we've got the first bucket was patient management, and I gave you 5 descriptions. The second one is team, and it's very simple. I could speak for 5 days on team management. And Tom, it's the following 3: hire for longevity, manage for harmony, and sort out the stuff while it's still small. I'm still looking for my third phrase to have less words. Find the good team, manage them for harmony, and address the issues before they become a big issue. And then, of course, the third one is the business. And that's a major problem. I've often joked in my seminars that I think if dentists could wave their magic wand, they'd have the patient drop the teeth off in the morning, pick up the teeth at the end of the day. They just went to dental school, as perhaps you did, I don't know, to be a dentist and to be pulled into the management and all these financial decisions and do I lease or do I buy? And I don't get into that. And thank goodness we have these wonderful consultants who really get into that in a big way.
And I'm going to come back to the team management in just a minute. Getting back to the first bucket, the patient bucket, the key of building a referral-based practice. You mentioned Yelp and Nextdoor and Google, obviously. We have these reviews that people feel like they are bound by or that threaten them, because a couple bad reviews can really harm any business. But I think the business that's referral-based is really your best defense against that.
Here's one of my mantras. A referred patient has bought before they walk through the door.
That's good. And I think that has always been a big thing for me. You mentioned the new patient experience, and in our practice, it's not complicated, but I'm very much focused on details. And we're going to talk about the danger of being a perfectionist in a minute. But our new patient exam has a very specific flow in terms of how the patient's brought in, what we do first, what we do second, what we do third. Not only to make sure it's a consistent experience, but that it's a thorough experience, because it really is from the person that answers the phone to that whole first day.
Yes.
That's what sticks with them the most. So let's go into perfectionism.
I was just going to say, actually, I was asked about this just yesterday. I was being interviewed. It wasn't a podcast, but I was being interviewed on Zoom. And the person said, how do you describe yourself? And I said, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so she asked me, and dentists will ask me this from the auditorium. They'll say, Jenny, what is a recovering perfectionist? I said, the difference is I've recognized I have a problem and I'm working on it. And so many dentists do not acknowledge the trait of an outstanding clinician has to be perfectionism. They do not tolerate mistakes. And I remember when my late husband his idea of a day off was to go with a good friend of his who was an anesthesiologist and spend the day in ER. And he, as a dentist, type A neurotic, was horrified at the flexibility. If we cut the leg off, does it really matter if we cut it off here or here? And he's there looking at these surgeons. And in fairness to the surgeons, Edmund told me that they would turn to him and say, we could never work in your field. You are microscopic. And we acknowledge that we have this latitude. And so they were actually giving respect to the dentist for their ability to fine tune it. You better be a perfectionist if you're going to be a good dentist.
Yeah, you have to be. And I always tell people the other surgical specialties, while there are many that are far more difficult than dentistry, they also have the benefit of working on a sleeping patient. And so when you're working on a live, moving, breathing patient and then trying to be that level of precise simultaneously, that's a very difficult combination. I embrace being a perfectionist, for better or worse, because that's, like you just said, that's the core of our training from the moment you're in dental school. Everything is small and precise that way, that to deliver even a good restoration requires a lot of precision, and a great one even more. And then within the context of owning my practice, I'm surrounded by mistakes every day, and they're little mistakes. But then what's often given as a negative, the term micromanager, where you're focused on little things. It's almost what we're naturally predisposed to become, because everything that we do, the littlest step, the littlest element really matters in the grand scheme of things. So there's this tension there that I'm seeking your advice on how to resolve. You're working with your staff member and they're making lots of little errors that if you were to say them out loud, they would sound completely silly. But you mentioned earlier, deal with things while they're small. So let's talk about that.
Yes, I have given a 60-minute program in dentistry for decades on working with perfectionists and procrastination. And I remember one year I was on the Chicago midwinter, and I had about 300 people in the room. They were mainly the dentists and spouses who never knew where the practice were, but had come to the Chicago midwinter as a nice travel trip, signed up for this program. And I had one woman, I've never forgot her. She ran up to me at the end of the program. She said, "I think you just saved my marriage," because I described her husband. And as a recovering perfectionist, and I've obviously not recovered, we do not make good supervisors or managers. And I explained, if a staff member gave me 15 pages of a typed document and there is one typo, I will guarantee I will find that typo. I will not look for it. It will jump out. And the old Jenny used to say, "Mary, there's a typo on page 9. And then Jenny learnt that didn't make any sense. So new Jenny now says, "Great program, a break document. Thank you for doing such a good job." The tendency for the perfectionist to pick up the mistake before they give the compliment. And I really had to change my management style. So I learned not to go to somebody and say, "How come this happened?" I removed the pronoun you, and I would now go to somebody and say, "Can we discuss what happened in this case so we can solve it so it doesn't happen again?" And just by removing the word you, we have depersonalized it.
I'll give you some just random examples. When somebody comes in, we wear different uniforms each day at work, and they come in the wrong uniform. Again, is it a big deal? Not the end of the world. We're still going to get our work done. But to me, it shows a carelessness in knowing that what day of the week it was. Knowing what uniform you were to wear that day. And again, to pull somebody aside to say that was wrong feels like an overreach. So you kind of let it go, but then it bugs you.
If you pull the person over when it happens, it's breaking up your rhythm. It causes an atmosphere in the office. We've now got people giving other people bad looks. If you leave it to the end of the day and then you're tired, you feel the resentment, but it's too late. You're tired. You want to go home. And so what I have to do is keep a notebook, tiny notebook, in their pocket of whatever they're wearing. And whether you go to the bathroom, write it down so you've captured it, but you don't have to address it that day. This way, it will be addressed, but it's done calmly. And when you do address it, you could say, "In the last 2 weeks, you have turned up or you have arrived with the incorrect uniform. So now you've got the 3 times, and now you can have a conversation about it."
I think that's good. And that kind of leads me to one of the next areas I wanted to address, which is reviews. We're talking about maybe giving some feedback on the fly, but I also know that you're a very big proponent of reviews. I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that you would give reviews 2 times a year. Most of us struggle to do it even once a year, myself included, because A, it's a big job. B, if I sit down on an annual basis And now I've got to try to come up with the things that annoyed me over the last year. It feels like some of my feedback is way too late. To your point of keeping the notebook and maybe doing that stuff a little bit sooner. So if I'm in a yearly review and I'm saying you didn't have your uniform on, the right uniform 3 times in the first 6 months of the year, it's like the two of us can barely remember that. I'd have to have written it down. So how do you help dentists approach reviews? Because I don't think anybody in any business really enjoys having to do that task, because it requires you to maybe have an uncomfortable conversation, or you end up just giving a lot of very positive reviews, which is nice. People deserve some positive feedback as well. It shouldn't all be negative. But also, if I just give a very positive review, it's not very useful to either one of us. So
Yeah.
maybe what are some tools to help with
Okay,
that?
it was very interesting. This year at the Yankee, I was invited to give 4 programs, so I sent my material in. And the committee came back and said, "We'd like to take your 4th program, which is on team management, performance reviews, and a few other things, and we'd like to make that to the staff only. So instead of putting you
Uh,
on the big stage, we're going to put you in the hotel so you can interact." And then they came back and they said, "After some thought, we actually are going to override our decision, and we want to put you now back on the main stage because we need the dentist to hear this." Be-
That's right. I
Because
was just going to
every
say that
dentist
was
on
the
that
audience
committee, like you, doesn't like reviews. And so I felt vindicated. And
for sure.
I do think it's always performance reviews. We just don't talk about reviews. It's always performance reviews. It's
Yeah.
every 6 months. So at the end of the year and then at the end of June, beginning of July, you cannot let, in my opinion, to let it go for so long, for a year at a time. That's exactly right. Who cares what happened then? The
Yeah.
reason that dentists don't like reviews is there is an assumption that if they give a good review, that means more money.
Yes. And that was going to be a follow
So,
up. Yes.
then this is what I explain to dentists. The purpose of the review, and I'm going to be real brutal, and obviously one would say
Yeah.
this to the staff, but I've got to get into dentist's head. The purpose of the review for the last 6 months is to see whether the staff member actually deserved the money that they were paid for the job that they did.
Right.
And if they get a good review, it just means they delivered what was committed and promised. And the point I'm making is if somebody really got a bad review, we should be asking for some money back.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with, oh, because you got a good review, now you're
Right.
going to get more money, which is what the staff think. No,
Yes.
staff. The fact you got a good review means you actually delivered what you were asked to do. So thinking you'd never put performance reviews past and any future money, future together, always must be separated.
Okay.
The other thing I'd say about reviews, and I can't remember where I learned this, I've used this for decades. I wish I could credit the person, but the system I have developed is that the dentist reviews the staff member, but each staff member reviews themselves. They down together. Question number 1, does Mary turn up in a timely manner? Mary says,
Right.
absolutely yes. Number 1 from the doctor, disaster, late 90% of the time. Now you've got a talking point,
Okay.
and you're talking about a specific thing. So then the really sophisticated dentist, and it doesn't happen very often, I encourage a dentist to let the staff member critique the dentist as a manager, not as a dentist,
Yeah.
not as a person, but as a manager. And that takes some confidence, but that's where the dentist may read something. Are you aware that you come in late almost every morning? That we start
Yeah. Yeah.
late because
Yeah.
actually you arrive late? And the
Yeah.
dentist thinks it's my practice, so I'm a few minutes late. But it's impacted every patient, the hygienist, the clinical staff, it's impacted for the whole day. So performance reviews to me, and if you ask your staff, Tom, what is the 2 things staff want from a dentist or an employer? Number 1, they want to be showed appreciation when they deserve it. And number 2, they really like the feedback. They look forward to the evaluation because they want to know that they're doing a good job.
And when you're separating the performance review every 6 months
Right.
from a raise, which I would think that would be considered on an annual basis, is there messaging with the team that you're giving them to let them know why these things that were previously together are now separated? In other words, you announce at a team meeting, this is how we're going to do reviews going forward. We're going to talk performance twice a year, and once a year, we're going to have a separate meeting about how the business is doing and whether there's money available to do a raise.
I'm a great believer in the following comment. I'm not a professional at it, and certainly if anybody is listening to this podcast who wants to know which consultants do it, I'll be happy to provide you with a list. I am very much in the camp of incentive and bonus. I think everybody gets the going rate, but there is
Yep.
an incentive and bonus. And my rule on an incentive and bonus is, number 1, it must be applied to everybody. So if you've got a part-time
Yes.
hygienist, it's obviously in proportion to the hours or the time. And you must have it, excuse me, a floating 3-month. So the staff can be really naughty. If they're paid on collection, January wasn't very good. February was absolutely wonderful because they bunched everything up, but then there's nothing left for March. So you know where I'm going with this. So it
Yeah.
needs to be on a floating. I think most consultants would agree that you put production and collection together and divide it into 2 to get an average. And because when I ran the practice, my collection percentage, and I'm very proud of this, I collected or had collected about 105%. So I usually had about $80,000 on the books as credits because I'm a great believer in prepayment. So my patients, we could actually afford to pay. We had 2 associates. We could afford to pay them on production. No associate gets paid on production today. I could afford to pay them on production because I knew the money was safe. So I absolutely believe that the incentive and bonus is the way to go. Everybody wins. And I'm horrified the number of times I find a practice saying, we'll give the practice administrator an extra percentage because the collections were high this month. Who produced the treatment for it there to be a collection about? It was the clinical staff. And who sold the patient and educated them on the reason to have fixed bridge instead of a removable partial? Oh, it was the hygienist. So to me, it's everybody's in the team.
So on that note, with those sorts of incentives, 2 things. One, I've, like many people, have done variations of that over the years. Always everyone in proportion. I used to just use the number of hours they worked. So if the bonus was $2 per hour, you would take how many hours they worked for that quarter, however many hundred of hours that was, and then multiply it by the dollar amount. But one of the things that happens is sometimes with those bonuses, you are hitting the bonus with some regularity, and then it becomes just assumed. There isn't. One of the things that was really a turnoff was people stopped even acknowledging it. At the beginning, they would come in after payday and say, "Oh my God, I saw the bonus you put in my check. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me." And then there was a point at which nobody said anything. It was just like, "Yeah, that's my extra money and I'm going to get it all the time." So that creates maybe a little owner resentment. I don't know if you manage that by changing the target, not just the amount, but maybe what's being measured, or
Okay, let me
what your
comment
thoughts
about
are
that.
there.
To absolutely confirm your point, I talked to a dentist one day who had taken the staff and the spouses +1 to Mexico.
Yeah.
And he said, not one person when they came back said thank you. he just hit the roof. So I don't want to spend too much time on bonus incentive. I know enough to
Sure.
know broad term, and I do have a sheet, and I could certainly send it to you and you could post it, that Christine Bernhardt, who used to be my director of consultants, when I had 8 consultants who used to go into the practices to take Jenny into the practice, Chris Bernhardt put together a wonderful incentive and bonus, which I think most probably is one of the best around. But she and I together worked on a 9-point, one-page handout that at least gives you the broad terms. But I urge everybody that if you're going to go into an incentive and bonus, you must work with a professional, because nothing is worse than a bad incentive and bonus.
Yeah.
You will
There you
kill the
go.
practice. Staff will actually, I've heard of dentists who walked in the morning and the staff just quit.
That's a great point. I love that.
The worst story I heard was that the practice administrator in one practice was ill one day and did not come in. And so one of the other people was at the business desk running the practice for the day, opened a drawer to find the book of all the money she had been paid for collections under the table that nobody knew about. I rest my
Bad.
case.
I'm going to move on. One of the other favorites of mine is you had developed this list of the top 20 ways that dentists are judged by patients. And the great thing about this list was that not only is it 20 things that if anybody wanted to really take temperature of their business, if they could go through that list of 20, it would give them a lot of material to work on. But also you put the list in a very specific order based on the importance of those items, with number 1 being a comfortable injection.
Well, correct. It's a comfortable, but did it hurt? A painless injection.
Yes. Yeah, painless injection. Thank you. Yeah. And a couple of my favorites, one of them was running on time, which is a huge, huge value of mine. Everything on this list really resonated, but I would say in our practice, that's something that we get complimented about because it's not common. And one of the things I would tell the audience is in response to being on time, patients show up to their appointments early. And it just becomes this self-fulfilling thing, being as they're showing up early, we're able to stay on time better. And it keeps feeding back on itself. The other one that jumped out at me was the sense that you did a thorough exam. I talked a little earlier about the new patient exam being a very particular experience for people. And we use the intraoral camera, as many people do. I would say it's one of my favorite things. But in a new patient exam, even if there isn't much going on, I'll snap a couple pictures and give a patient just a very brief tour of some things I observed. It may not even be things that require treatment. And so many times after doing that little intraoral camera review, slideshow, whatever you want to call it, they'll say, this is the most thorough exam I've ever had in my life. And I think to myself, this was just really pretty basic. We didn't get anything real complicated, but nobody's ever just taken the time to do those simple things. And I can tell you, it didn't take a lot. So my question would be, on that list, is there anything that you over the years have moved up in importance?
No, there is a quote. I wish I had created this quote. It's created by a dentist. When I met, he was in San Francisco. Now he's moved up to Marin. And Clyde Schultz and I have actually lectured together. And Clyde Schultz has this wonderful statement, and I can give it to you in a positive way and a negative way. The positive way is that an educated patient cannot say no.
Yeah.
Or an educated patient can only say yes. So when the patient says no, it means they don't understand the benefit.
Yeah.
But
Great
people
point.
keep thinking it's because of the money. If I may, of the 20, tell you what my bottom 3 are.
Yeah.
Number 20 is money. Because I believe if the patient understands the benefit and we build a referral practice, and when a referred patient walks through the door, they've already bought. So money is number 20. Number 19 is location. If you're running a referral practice, you don't need a location. If you're running a practice that does not have a good reputation, then you want to maybe be exposed in the mall because you are going through 100 patients a month who maybe most of them don't come back. So if you're doing what I believe one should do, location is number 19, and number 18 are hours. If a patient has heard of you, they will come within your hours.
The next thing I want to talk about is the current generation, the young dentists. So, how do you see their experience of practice? And again, I don't know to what degree you come across younger dentists that maybe have worked in a DSO or a large group and then made the transition to private practice, but share with me a little bit of your perspective on the younger generation of dentists today.
I feel, and I'm saying this as a non-clinician, obviously, so I don't want to overstep the mark. But
Sure.
it would appear to me that when most dentists are graduating from dental school, they've got a debt which is absolutely unbelievable. I don't know that they have the confidence to go into an independent practice on day one. I remember when Edmund graduated, he was the last year out of PNS before it became UOP. And I remember we opened our practice on day one, and he said, "Jenny, I feel there's nothing that can walk through this door that I don't know how to handle." That's how confident he felt with the training. I think those days have gone. I want to say he made 80 crowns. I want to say he made, I think, 40 sets of dentures. When they walked out of the school on graduation day, and he said, "The reason I want to be a general dentist is I'm fascinated with all the changes, and I have no idea what's going to walk into the door the next day. I will never be bored." He said, "I don't want to do endo 8 hours a day." And
True.
I'm not sure from what I'm hearing, so it's secondhand, that the training is as wide and as deep as it used to be. So maybe they feel they have to their wings in an easy way. And then, of course, do they need to find, if they're going to be an associate, they need to make a good choice. So they've picked a well-managed practice to be a role model should they wish to move on. And
Yeah.
the DSOs, it's very interesting. When they first came out, Tom, they were basically buying anybody. If you wanted to sell to a DSO, they were there. If you wanted to join it. But now, starting maybe 4 or 5 years ago when money dried up a little bit, they're really picky. They only want successful practices. So if I was to sum up, I think that the DSOs will always be around. At the moment, it's about 15 to 20%, my research shows. And the prognosis, they think it's going to go to about 30%. Honestly, I actually thought it was higher. So that's that group over here. Over here, in my opinion, we will always have the independent practice. I was on Zoom yesterday and I was ready to murder the speaker. She kept talking about, "I work with clients who run a cash practice." I said, "Does that mean they don't accept credit cards or checks?" She said, "No." I said, "Cash practice, it sounds like you're running a used car salesman."
Yeah.
It's an independent practice. And I don't, she said, "I'll call it fee for service." We're back to money again. It's an independent practice. It is independent of the DSOs or the insurance.
Exactly.
I see dentists moving. I'm already seeing it with physicians. They're moving into concierge medicine. My own physician is concierge. I have his cell phone 24/7.
Yeah.
And I pay a monthly fee for that. And I'm thrilled to know I have the security. So I see it becoming rather black and white. I see who feel comfortable in the DSO environment. They don't want the responsibility. They basically want to be told what to do, when to do it. I
Yeah.
see the independent guys over here. I say guys, 70% are women now. The
Yeah.
people to be worried about are the middle of the road. They don't want to go to the DSOs, but maybe they haven't got a handle on the management, and maybe they're not very good managers of staff, and they're not very good about reading the monthly figures, and they don't have a handle on the profit and loss. And that's the group that is going to have a problem if they don't wake up.
Yeah, that's good. I love that analysis. And on the topic of young folks, one of the other things that I've heard you speak about is staff appreciation. We touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about doing performance evaluations. And a favorite little clip I see on the internet periodically is from a TV show called Mad Men, where the main character, Don Draper, he's this boss in an ad firm, and he's arguing with one of his creative people. And he's saying to her, "It's your job. I give you money and you give me ideas." And she says, "But you never say thank you." And he says, "That's what the money's for." And I think that in some ways, I think that can encapsulate maybe how some dentists feel about that. But obviously that's not enough. And so what I want to ask you is what do you recommend to practices to have the appropriate amount of appreciation, or in what ways do you advise people to do that? There's lots of different things out there, but to me, it always is a struggle of how often is the appreciation happening, or maybe how it's being delivered. So what are your thoughts around team appreciation?
Well, before I get that, I want to build on something when you talked about Madman. I actually remember that scene, and I can't remember her name. She's the one with the glasses who was the person who came
Like
up
a
through the
copywriter.
ranks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
I was giving a program one day, and I can't remember which convention I was on, but I remember standing on stage and we were talking about appreciation. And the dentist put his hand up and he said, "Jenny, I show appreciation twice a month." And I thought, it's not every day, but I said, "That's wonderful. How do you do it?" He said, "I give them a paycheck." You can't make these stories up.
Yeah.
He said, if they weren't any good, they would get a paycheck, they would be fired. He said,
Right.
"Isn't that enough?" And I said, "No."
Yeah. Not anymore. It's not.
Edmund and I came from Europe. I moved over from London, and Edmund emigrated from Paris. And certainly both of our European backgrounds, when we came to California, we were culturally, I think, surprised how close the dentist and spouse were with their employees. They had them over to barbecue at the house, and they became a family. And that really was not Edmund and my's ways of doing it. And I
Yeah.
sensed that there was something that we were not building with the team. So I started having a Christmas party where I invited every employee to bring plus one. And I found that after the first Christmas party, the atmosphere in the practice was completely different. And people would come up to me and say, "When you get Dr. D. St. George out of the office, he's really a nice person." Because they never saw that. He was very tall, 6 foot
Yeah.
4, very formal. Um, I never called him Edmund in the office, always called him Dr. D. St. George. So we was very formal. And when they finally saw him having a glass of wine and relaxing, it completely changed the dynamics. So if I had it
It's
just
good.
before Christmas, that was good till about May. And then I just felt that we were losing that camaraderie. So time for the picnic in the local park in the summer. And that was good for another 4 or 5 months. And the other thing I did is I don't celebrate birthdays. I've never understood why we celebrate we're getting older. I just didn't get it. But staff like that. So I
They do.
designated somebody to take charge of birthdays, to order the cake and remember the birthday. And those little small things. The other thing is, I remember at the end of the day, one day, Edmund turned around and there was not a single clinical assistant there. He was with a patient. He wanted something. He couldn't find it. He called out and everybody had taken home. And I'm
Jeez.
sitting there. And so the next morning I said, "Guys, when you're ready to leave, I need you to walk into the treatment room and say to the patient, 'Mrs. Smith, would you excuse me, Dr. D. St. George, I'm leaving now. Is there anything I can do before I leave for you?'" Give him permission to say, "Thank you for asking and thanks for a great day."
I think it's important to do that. We do birthdays and we do work anniversaries in our practice because both are sprinkled throughout the year. And the other thing that I think is a struggle with appreciation, I like everybody to be included. In other words, if we're doing birthday lunch, for example, it's lunch for the entire office, even though it's only one person's birthday or work anniversary. because everybody should be celebrating together with that person. And I know some offices get into dental hygiene month or dental assistant week or office staff week or month, whatever these holidays are. And I always struggled with that because it felt like by celebrating only one segment of the practice, you were ignoring the
I've
others.
never, and as far as having a lunch, if there's a dentist on this podcast who has 15 staff members, we had, I think, 15 staff members.
Yeah.
We can't go out for lunch 15 times a year.
Yeah.
So I expect a cake and a few minutes in the staff room, but I don't expect the dentist to take 15 staff members out for 15 birthday lunches. Sorry.
My lunch budget is very big in my office.
I can see that.
So I want to move on to the older dentists. So these would be dentists that are maybe getting ready to think about retirement, transitioning, bringing in an associate, things like that. So in terms of that later career dentist, how do you see them focusing on their practice, or do you have advice for them on how they should be preparing themselves for the next stage in their career?
Well, I think, Tom, there are going to be two categories. The dentists who still have a passion for dentistry and actually want to continue, them wanting to sell the practice, but to stay on for 2 or 3 years. I just talked to one actually last week, and he sold the practice and he's now an associate. And he's thrilled because he gets to do dentistry the way he wants, and he doesn't have to pay the bills and all the things that keep him up at night. And then there are the dentists who perhaps have to work because financially they hadn't prepared. And that's always a sad story. Paul Sletton has done practice transitions for dentists, just specializing in dentistry. And he's always said that you need a minimum of 5 years to prepare for how you're going to leave the profession. And as Stephen Covey says, start with the end in mind. And I think if more dentists earlier in their career began to think how they wanted to end up, they maybe would make different decisions at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I think you're right. You can't just leave one day. You've got to really plan properly. Because if you've given your whole life to your practice, you want to protect your team, you want to protect your patients, you want to make sure everybody's being taken care of after you've left the practice, or at least become the employee to the new owner, however you do it. I think that's important.
I've heard horror stories of staff who walked in on a Monday morning to find that the practice had been sold. Nobody told them, and they just have a new boss.
I've heard dentists say that they've done that. And again, I'm not excusing it, but this is my understanding of that because I haven't gone through it, obviously. I think during the transaction, there's always fear that if the staff finds out too soon, maybe some of them will quit because they say, oh, Dr. Jones is leaving. I don't know who this new person is, and maybe I won't like them, so maybe this is my time to leave. And then that can affect the transaction. However, it doesn't replace that they could still leave on Monday.
I mean, when
it's
it's
a hard
completed and the lawyers have done their paperwork, then you've got this middle transition when the staff are told, and the biggest gift, the biggest asset that the seller can utilize is having his current or her current staff stay. That becomes an investment in the future, and the buyer should be thrilled to see the current staff stay. Now, there may be a troublemaker, and that needs to be taken care of. But in theory, people say that when you buy a practice, you do not change anything for the first year. Let the patients visit the way it's always been, see the same faces, and then after a year, you must probably have a better idea of what you want to do.
It reminds me of a story I heard you tell one time about a young dentist looking for a practice to work in as an associate. And you had advised that dentist to show up early.
I knew where you were going. I still say
Can you tell me? Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. I love that story.
Yeah, I say you just arrived 2 hours early. You say, oh, I'm so sorry. I allowed some extra time and the freeway was empty. And just sit in the corner. Look as if you're reading a book or whatever, and you note, you
Yeah.
listen to everything that's being said. You listen to the way the phone is answered. You listen to the staff. You listen to the way that the dentist is handing over the patient at the end of the visit to the administrative staff. You will learn more about that practice in that 90 minutes sitting there than sitting in days of interviews.
Yeah. I think you're 100% right. And I think that's I just love that. I think it's a great idea and it's great advice because it's hard for an associate to know what they're getting into unless they spend some time. It's not the kind of position where you can go in and like work for a week. Dentistry doesn't lend itself to just popping in and doing a little dentistry and then deciding if you like it. You're committing a little bit blind, but I think that's
I'll tell
good.
you something Edmund did, and I've never heard of another dentist who did it, but maybe I've just not asked the right questions. When we got down to the final, we had two we had to make a decision on. Edmund had them both come in and spend a day with him. In the morning, he was the dentist, and he had the associate applicant assist him at the chair. And in the afternoon, the applicant was the dentist, and Edmund assisted him. Now, I don't know what the legalities
Love it.
are, and I know that we would have taken care of it,
Sure.
but see what
Yeah.
you're getting.
That's right. Yeah. It's it's hard. It's very hard. You can talk to whatever place they worked in before. Sometimes though that's not possible because they haven't given notice yet. Dental labs can sometimes be a good resource because you can talk to dental labs that they've sent cases to,
Right.
and the dental lab can give you feedback on what they're getting. Or you talk to specialists they referred to. So if you were to ask a prospective candidate, where did you refer your perio patients, for example? Oh, we sent them to Dr. Smith. And then you can call Dr. Smith and say, what was your impression of patients you got from this doctor?
I'm going to tell you a story I've never told publicly, and I'm hopefully, I don't know whether it's illegal, whatever, but when Evan was down to the final two, he disappeared. And I said, "Where were you?" He said, "I was in the parking lot." I said, "What were you doing there?" He said, "I was checking the inside of their car. How they keep their cars, how they're going to keep my lab."
So true. I love that. That's a great idea. That's good. See, he respected the details.
Oh, yes.
So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to transition us to a second segment here, if you will. I've got some role play. I'm going to give you some scenarios. I'll play the dentist with the problem. I'll give you just a very brief description of the situation. And I'd love to just hear your feedback or reaction to it. And if you have other stories to share along those lines, I'd love to hear them. So the first one, we're going to call this the toxic star hygienist. And in this case, my top producing hygienist is absolutely fantastic clinically. Patients love her. She does great work. But she has constant conflict with the front desk and the dental assistants. So the patients love her, but the team is exhausted. And even a couple team members may be considering leaving because of her. But I'm afraid if I reprimand her or even let her go, the production and the practice is going to tank because it's very difficult to find a hygienist. What would you do?
I'm going to say this happens so many more times than dentists admit it. This actually not only happened to us, but I know of practices. And I say to the dentist, you have to bite the bullet. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You have to bite the bullet. The dentist will fight it. Will tell you that when you bite the bullet, the most amazing thing happens. The atmosphere in the practice completely changes. The staff now feel respected again because they really felt that the hygienist was, I'm not saying she was lording it over. The dentist allowed it to happen. Patients are not dumb. And if 10% of the patients walked out, their relationship was with the hygienist, not with the dentist.
Yeah.
The relationship is with the dentist. So I say, bite the bullet, suck it up, make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's great. And again, that particular example was a hygienist, but it could be a dental assistant. It could be a front office person.
Absolutely.
The harmony of the whole team is really So important. We had a case years ago with a team member. I don't remember what position it was, but the person was constantly late. And as I said, in our practice, we value running on time, which means we value showing up to work on time. And when this one person kept coming in late, you could see the mood start to shift, because if I'm another employee on the team, and to this point, we've always showed up on time, and this person's getting away with coming in late, why should I come in on time anymore? It can very easily start you down this spiral of people are just they're going to imitate what they're seeing. And I think you're right. If the owner is permitting that behavior, whatever it might be, then others will begin to follow suit.
Can I put a saying around
Yes,
what
please.
you just said?
Yeah.
When a dentist allows an employee to perform some behavior that is not appropriate, they have now all staff members permission to do the same thing.
Spot on. All right, so let me give you my next one. This one we're calling Emergencies Are Blowing Up My Schedule. This is a scheduling dilemma. We've always prided ourselves on exceptional service in the practice, and we try to see all emergency patients on the same day. But it's starting to ruin the schedule. Planned production is collapsing, the team is stressed, and we end most days late. I want to help people in the practice, but I'm also running a business. How do you address this issue without losing patient goodwill?
Okay, I actually spend 20 minutes on this subject in my seminars. And obviously, you and I don't have 20 minutes today. So let me just make it very simple. When an emergency patient calls, we need to interview the patient. Too many staff say, oh, you have an emergency. I can see you. Come down this morning and we'll fit you in somehow. So I have about 7 questions that the employee, and I used to have, when we had paper in the office, it was actually an emergency. How long has it been hurting off and on? How long has it been hurting constantly? Where is it in the mouth? Does it hurt to hot or cold or both? Does it hurt when you press on it? And the most important question, as a non-clinician, I wanted to ask, do you have a temperature? And if they say they don't know, have them take the temperature and call back. I'm praying that they have a temperature, because that means we can bring them in, give them antibiotics, do whatever. We're not going to be doing full rooted endo.
Yeah.
So the important thing is to interview them. Point number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Point number 2, you must take control of your emergencies. Otherwise, they will take control of you. So point number 2, and this is exactly what I used to say on the phone. Dr. D. St. George is so committed to be of service to patients in pain. One of the very few times we mentioned it, they said they had an emergency. To patients in pain, that we keep special time every morning just for patients like you. Our time this morning is 9:30.
Blank.
Now, a genuine emergency says what? Thank you. I'll be there.
Be there. Yeah.
Oh, God, the husband took the car. I'll call my next door neighbor. Jenny, I'll sort it out. I'll be there. The non-emergency says, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to be able to come at that time. And depending on my mood, and I can do it with a laugh, and I've said it in my seminars, and I don't know whether anybody's ever had the guts to say it, but the thing that really one says to the patient, I'm so sorry. I thought you said this was an emergency. I didn't realize you were looking for a convenient appointment.
Right.
You don't call a hospital at 9 in the morning and say, I'm having a heart attack. And they say, come right down to emergency. I say, actually, I've got to go and do some shopping. I'm looking for a new pair. No, emergency patients do not negotiate for a convenient appointment.
Agreed. Yeah.
Now,
100%.
to go back to your question, how do I, on the phone, know to bring them in at 9:30? because in my morning meeting, I don't call it a huddle, I call it a morning meeting, I ask the clinical staff where they want the emergencies. I don't believe in keeping special emergency time out. I just think that's a disaster. So I look at the clinical staff and say, where do you want your emergencies for today? I do not look at the doctor, because if I look at the doctor and say, where do you want your emergencies for today? The answer is, bring them all in, we'll sort it out. So I ask the clinical staff and they will tell me, and that gives me the confidence to say, our time is. And
Oh, that's good. I like that.
always try and get your emergencies in the morning, because we should have long mornings and short afternoons, so we have more flexibility. If they've got to be referred to a specialist, we've got time to do it in courtesy to the specialist. A genuine emergency, honestly, is sitting in their car when you drive up at 7:30 or 8 in the morning. That's a genuine emergency. So emergencies to me can be the biggest practice builder.
We still have patients to this day that when they come in, they say, do you remember that time you came in to see me on a Saturday? And then that sticks with them forever.
You're
this could
exactly
be
right.
20 years ago. Yeah. So on our next role play, this will be two doctors with two philosophies. So this is getting back to the experienced owner hiring an associate. And my associate in this scenario, my associate's clinically strong, produces well, but our treatment philosophies are not aligned. Their recommendations can be more aggressive, and patients are questioning why we say different things. So the concern is certainly about patient trust, liability, and consistency, but just letting the associate go would set us back months. So if you were this practice, how would you approach it?
Okay, I think my gut reaction is that this was a senior dentist who was not proactive. There are two ways to go through life, being proactive or reactive. Reactive is when you put the burglar alarm, when the house was burglarized the day before, you put a new, I had a neighbor do this many years ago. I said, Bill, I see you're putting an alarm system in. He said, yes, we were cleaned out last night. If he'd been proactive, he would have put the alarm in before the house was burgled. I said, oh, so you're wiring a house now that's lost all the silver and whatever. And he looked at me. So if a dentist finds himself, as you described, with a young associate who philosophically is out of sync with, then I would have thought they hired the wrong person.
Yeah. And they need to have sorted that out ahead of time.
But you have raised another point. When I did used to consult, I remember I was working with 4 endodontists in Texas, and the senior one was actually a very well-known speaker, and I knew him from the speaking world. And we had 4 completely different dentists with 4 different personalities telling each staff member 4 completely different things. So one dentist would go to the front desk and say, I need you to do this, and then you know what it is. And they were killing the staff. The staff, whatever the staff did, the chances are they were mishandling it for 3 of the 4 dentists. So I finally sat the dentist down and I said, okay, who's good with staff? Fine, you're going to be the HR person. Who's good with landlords and leases? Okay, you're going to do that. Who's good with equipment and inventory? So I gave everybody their own job description. I said, you're going to meet every single month. And this is very important, as so few dentists do it. If you have more than one dentist, you need to have a dentist-only staff meeting. And if you work with your spouse, I've been married to 2 dentists, and I've worked with both of them 24/7. You need to have a business meeting with your spouse when you're both involved in the practice.
And that's to discuss any issue in the practice.
That's exactly right.
Staff, operation, whatever.
And that's when, if I was running the business side and Evan's in the clinical, we don't get to talk during the day, right?
Yeah.
So when do we end up talking? It came to a head when he woke me up at 3 o'clock one morning. You can't make these stories up. He woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, when the hell is Mr. Robinson coming in for his dentures? I said, gosh, I didn't think to bring the appointment book to bed. What was I thinking? Do this
That's
anymore?
great. I love his commitment. I've got one more role play for you. This is a long-term employee blocking progress. So my front office team member's been with me for 15 years. Patients adore her, but she struggles with new technology. So online scheduling, digital forms, text reminders. She resists every change we try to make, and it's slowing us down. I don't want to hurt her, but I also can't let the practice fall behind. So what's the right path forward?
If I had 1,000 dentists in the room and I asked them what the number one personality trait or talent they want from an employee, I will guarantee the vast majority will put their hand up and say loyalty. Dentists will
Yeah.
kill for a loyal patient. And I had a dentist one day, he put his hand up and he said, I'm having a real problem. She does this wrong. He actually went on his fingers. He said, she is doing 6 things wrong. And I said, so why is she still with you? And he said, quote unquote, because she's so loyal. And I said, let me see if I understand what I've just heard. She loyally is coming in to do this wrong and this wrong. He said, oh, he said, when you put it like that, they have to bite the bullet. Actually, he was a dentist who lived 2 houses away from me. And he asked me to go into his practice one day. And he had Attila the Hun on the front desk. She was just awful. She was killing the practice. And the only reason he was successful, he was a wonderful Italian dentist, such a fabulous personality. But she was just ruining it. And so I said to him privately, why is she still there? And he said, the devil that you know is better than the one that you don't know. He said, this one's bad. I don't know what's coming if I fired her.
Yeah.
So he kept it inside. He never told her.
Mm.
And one day I understand he blew it. Maybe she picked up a blue pen instead of a green pen. Whatever that little thing was, he lost it. And all the stress that he'd been, and so he moved her out. And he came to me later and he said, why didn't I do that earlier? I said,
Yeah. Wow.
that was your decision. It's part of being the perfectionist. And what you need to realize is that when you don't make a decision, you have in fact made a decision not to make a decision.
Before we wrap up, Jenny, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share any other words of wisdom you want to impart on the audience, or anything that's on your mind before we go.
I have historically called dentistry a profession.
Mhm.
And I'm beginning to say to my peers, it's become an industry. There are so many non-dental people, whether it's the marketing people or the website, all these people with no dental backgrounds coming in and hustling and saying to the dentist, you need to do this and you need this and you need this. And I think dentists potentially are losing the way. And you can talk to some of these vendors and they will admit that many of their clients sign up for the $100 marketing, whatever it is, and they don't utilize it. And so dentists are paying for this turnkey instant, and what they need to do is take a deep breath, slow down, build the referral practice, remembering that your happy patient becomes your ambassador. And that ambassador goes around to town and they're selling your practice. And a referred patient who walks through the door. Now, if you're working with a DSO and you're listening to Tom and I, you can run your referral practice within a large clinic. Just treat them differently. And if that means you need to go to the administration desk and train the staff that when your patient comes to be checked out, there are certain things that you require.
I think that's fantastic. I love that. I think that's so true. And referrals are always going to be king. Jenny, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It meant the world to me that you would sit down and spend this time sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
It's been an absolute honor and pleasure. And you and I could go on far longer than anybody wants to listen to. Thank you for a wonderful time.
Once again, I want to thank our guest, Jennifer D. St. George, for sharing her valuable time with us today. If you'd like to follow up with her after the show, you can send her an email at jenny@jdsg.com. That's jenny@jdsg.com. Tell her Dr. Tom sent you. And if you'd like to reach me, use my show page, drtom.show. That's drtom.show. Thanks for listening. Make it a great day.